Welcome to La Trobe University. My name's Linda Wannan. Today we're joined by Libich, who's with the School of Economics. Jan's recently received a prestigious teaching award from the Australian government, and we'll be discussing his highly successful philosophies in teaching. Welcome, Jan.
Thank you, Linda. Thanks for having me.
You're most welcome. So, Jan, tell us about your teaching philosophies.
Look, I mean, I don't think there's anything so special about my teaching. It's that I really believe that all this memorizing and rote learning that a lot of our students perform, especially at the primary and high school level, is not the right way to get good teaching outcomes.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to really promote my students to go a little bit deeper and really enjoy the teaching rather than studying before the exam. So I've implemented in my teaching, I've implemented some strategies to try to encourage them to do that and to put the incentives for them to do that.
So that's fairly good philosophy. And with these teaching methods of yours, you've produced various videos. Tell me about them. How do they help your teaching?
Well, this is one of the aspects, not the only one, but the idea is to bring the material to life. I teach mainly economics, and people have this idea that economics is really boring. It's about shifting curves, and it's about money all the time, and it's about greed. And I'm kind of trying to change this perception. So one of the ways to do that is to be able to use this beautiful setup here that we have at La Trobe, this studio, and I invite various policymakers. Politicians, prolific academic economists, and I interview them about various topics that relate to whatever we're covering in my classes. And the idea is to really just, put a different, kind of more real-world perspective on what we're covering, so that the students see it's not just about the curves, it's not about the theory, but the theory can actually be applied to real-world questions.
Okay, that sounds excellent, but there's this overarching concern about assessment. How do you deal with assessment?
Well, assessment is a big part of the story. It's a big part of the incentives that you put in place. I started off as most academics do, which is having a midterm exam, having a final exam, and that's it. But what you quickly discover is that when you turn up for the tutorial, the students are there and they basically just sit and wait to receive another mini lecture. They don't engage at all. And the reason is that, if you don't have incentives in place so that they actually have to do work at home, they just don't do it. So the first thing I did, I put at least, generally in my classes, I put at least 20-25% of the assessment, sometimes more, on the tutorial component. So every week, students have a problem set, an assignment that they have to do at home. It consists of a lot of questions. Many of them are not questions that you can just copy paste from the textbook, but they have to go out to various sources and research, or they have to watch one of the videos that I produce with the policymakers and answer some questions. And then they come in with the problem set, which is a certain part of the assessment, and then another part is for them to discuss it with their classmates in the tutorial, and then present it in front of the class, and that is an additional part of the assessment. This is how it works every week. So they really have to, if they haven't done the work at home, they basically have nothing to discuss, and they fairly early on they realize that this is not the way to proceed. So they really have to do the work every week for them to succeed.
Okay. So discussion's quite important to you. You're known for incorporating discussion within your classes, not just tutorials. What's all this about?
Look, I think there's a lot of research that shows that discussion is really essential. This is one of the things that I do. In my first lecture, I give students some research statistics. One of them is from a book by Rose and Gold, 1992. And they show the percentage, so they've done some research, and they show that if after 48 hours, after some kind of learning took place, students only remember about 10% of what they read and about 20% of what they heard. So that's not a very effective way to learn. However, if they actually discuss it with their classmates, you're up to about 70% of remembering the content and understanding it at a deeper level. And then when you actually try to teach someone, you're up to about 95%. So I give them these statistics to convince them that they shouldn't just work on the problem set on their own, but they should get in touch with they should have a learning partner, and they should talk together about their answers and try to argue about them. This is I think the way to learn. And there's actually research that shows that when you talk, our brain does a different type of thinking than if you just read or listen. Much deeper type of thinking. So this is kind of where true learning is taking place, and I'm kind of trying to awaken that a little bit.
And you're managing to incorporate that into lectures as well as tutorials.
Oh yeah, that's harder. I teach one of the first year classes, macroeconomics, that I teach. I have about 400 students, but you can do that. So I have these what I call bus times. There's generally one or two, sometimes more, in each lecture. And these are kind of carefully prepared questions that I would prepare at the beginning or prior to the class. And I get the students to discuss them with the person sitting next to them, or even a small group of three or four students. And then after about 2 or 3 minutes of discussing, they basically report back to me, and we have a more general discussion. So, it can be done even in a large setup. Obviously, there's a lot more discussion in the tutorials that have about 20 students or so. Plus, the discussion component is also, it actually follows the lectures as well. So we have the online management system like Moodle or whatever the university is using. So we can, I generally take the discussion topics that we've had and post them online with links to various other articles that they might want to read, and the students can kind of continue these discussions, even after the class. And again, the idea is for them to really think about the topic, not just from a theoretical perspective, like a boring textbook kind of stuff, but more about how it relates to their life, how it relates to the decisions, and so on.
Excellent. So what other things do you include in your lectures?
Well, I do various. I have things like competitions, and the idea is to provide a bit of an extra incentives for them to go beyond what's expected in the class. So I organize, book vouchers and some chocolate prices.
Ooh, chocolate.
Well, these are actually more popular than the book vouchers. So students can do an extra task, and then there's a draw, and some lucky students get these. So this is one of the things. What else? There's there are a few things. Let me just think. I have various quizzes. So one of the tutorial components is a quiz that, and it's not scheduled every tutorial. It's random, and the students don't know in advance when it will occur. But the idea is, again, to give an extra incentive for them to do the work, because if they've done the work, they generally do very well in the quiz as well.
Yeah, excellent. I hear you've kind of gone back to basics with some behavioural like psychology, a kind of bribing of students. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, I hear that all the time when you start talking about chocolate prices. Is it bribing students? And at face value, it may seem like that, but I recently read a very interesting parenting book. You might be surprised, but I have 2 little kids, so that's what you do. You read parenting books, and this one is excellent. It's called Childwise, and one of the things I learned from it is there's an important distinction between a goal incentive and a bribe. So basically, the way they explain it is a goal incentive is, if you offer some reward for the child to kind of engage in some activity that will lead to some long-term benefit in terms of some long-term skill. I mean, if you say, I'm going to buy you a soccer ball if you learn how to swim, if you practice and learn how to swim, that's a goal incentive. That's not a bribe. A bribe is something that you offer that has some kind of moral nature, and that's something that the child should be doing anyway. You know, don't hit your brother. I mean, you know, and I'll give you chocolate. That's clearly a bribe. That's wrong. So I like to think that what I do in my classes is more a goal incentive, because I'm kind of trying to incentivize students to invest in their learning and put a little bit more effort in, and hopefully they develop some kind of long-lasting skills. But again, you know, if you think that's, you know, a chocolate reward as a bribe, then I probably won't convince you otherwise.
Oh, well, good on you. Okay, so some of your subjects are thought to be fairly technical, and we all know that many students have issues with basic maths. How do you cope with that? How do you deal with that?
That's actually true, and I'm not quite sure how that happens. You know, when you write an equation on the board, many students, you kind of know, they have a reaction. They almost have goosebumps when they see an equation, you know, that actually prevents them from learning that. You know, it may be well within their mental capacity to learn the maths that they need, but you know, they just the negative attitude they have already stops them from doing it. So I have this. I have various techniques, but one of them is, and that's also one thing that I do in the first lecture, is that I try to show them that it's just mathematics is just another language. It's just a different language where you just need to ask for the translation of that particular equation into the language that you understand. So what I do, I pick a word in English in random, and basically just ask the students to come up and write that word in a different language, whatever language they may be able to speak. And you know, in Australia, it's a very multicultural society. So what I get sometimes is that, you know, 20 or 25 different languages. It's actually quite amazing. And then I ask the students to pause and think about what they would do if you came to a different country and they saw that different word written somewhere on the wall. You know, and they wouldn't try to memorize it, which is what students tend to do with equations, but they would, you know, try to look up the meaning in the dictionary, a meaning into a language that they can understand. And so this is what I encourage my students to do. Whenever I have, well, for my first years, whenever I have an equation in my slides, there's always a sentence underneath that says, what is the translation of this equation into your language, into plain English? And that kind of hopefully gets the students to pause, and rather than just, you know, memorize that equation, just to get them to think about the meaning. And generally there's very simple meaning in most basic kind of equations.
And I understand that you sometimes incorporate jokes and even cartoons into your teaching. How do you do that?
Well, my slides are full of various cartoons, and it's, you know, a part of it is just to break up the momentum and get the students to relax a little bit in the class. But they're quite carefully selected to always demonstrate the point that we're trying to make in the material. So, you know, they're not there just to be funny, but they're there for a purpose. And you know, you mentioned being funny. In fact, unfortunately, I'm not very funny, and I learned that the hard way. Well, I always had a suspicion, but I learned that the hard way when, you know, on teaching evaluations, students always, there's like this open-ended question that says, you know, what other comments do you have about this lecturer? And one year, one student wrote something like, oh, you know, Jan is a nice guy and he tries hard, but you know, sometimes he doesn't realize that students are actually laughing at him rather than with him. And well, you know, and in fact, that kind of comment has since been repeated. So it's probably true, and I don't mind, you know, as long as the students are learning. That's what matters. And you know, I really believe strongly that, and this is I think what my teaching kind of approach is, how it's different from others or from some other people. I really believe that we all, as human beings, we have this really inner need to learn. You know, it kind of, I can see it in those little kids. They just have to discover everything, and they just ask, you know, thousands and thousands of questions. And I wonder, where, and it seems that the standard kind of educational system kills this inquisitiveness, this what I call thirst for knowledge. And so a part of my approach is really just to motivate the students and to show them that there is this thing, you know, that they can actually enjoy it. It's not like a struggle. It's actually something that they can really embrace and have fun with. So that kind of hopefully goes a little bit beyond just the economics and material. It just maybe shows them a way of, you know, lifelong kind of learning. And again, you know, many of my economics colleagues would probably frown on that notion of us being more than just, you know, someone who delivers the content and teaches the theories and so on. But I really believe that, you know, what you as the lecturer bring in is quite important. I actually had a guest. I also interviewed someone about effective teaching and learning, Dr. Carrie Howells from the University of Tasmania, and she recently wrote a book about these things, how your innermost attitude as a teacher, how it kind of flows onto the students, and how it can greatly improve the learning experience of the students. Because, you know, if you're grumpy and you think about all the things you need to do and you just rock up for the lecture, you know, it shows. And then the lecture is generally very flat because you're just not being, you know, you're not taking them on a ride. So that's what I try to do.
And that sets us beautifully into our next question, which is, how do you set up the students' expectations of themselves? How do you do that?
Well, that's actually not easy, and I worked quite hard on this. So first thing in my subject guide for every subject, I'm very, very clear about what the students are required to do, what they can expect from us. Yeah. And it's all spelled out, and I make it imperative that the students actually read the guide so that they, from day one, they know what's coming. And then in the first couple of lectures, I actually talk about that, the fact that the subject is fairly high, very technical and fairly difficult. So, and a lot of work will be required, you know, weekly problem sets and so on, hours and hours of homework. So I encourage all the students who are not willing to, or who are not capable of doing all this, to withdraw from my subjects. And if they, you know, if they're not core, they can withdraw and go do something that might be easier. And I don't mind. I understand that many students might have, you know, work commitments and so on, but you know, I make it very, very clear at the beginning that, you know, a lot of work will be required. So one of the things I have is in the first few, you know, assignments, the last question is always, how long did this assignment take you? And then broken up into, you know, how much time did you spend writing or reading the textbook? How much time did you spend writing? How much time did you spend discussing with your classmates? And then the next question is, well, do you think you'll be able or willing to do this every week? And if they answer no, then they should come and see me so that we can discuss some alternative options. But you know, they always have the option of just, you know, withdrawing from the subject and doing something different.
And you do that very early on in the semester.
This is you know, from the first lecture and then second lecture, and you know, the first few weeks I keep repeating the same story over and over again. How important it is to work. How important it is not to memorize, not to rely on the. So another thing I have in my first week slides is that I show them how they should approach the assignments. Well, first we discuss it in the lecture, and generally what you find is that students just read, you know, they would read the question, they go to the textbook, and they would just, okay, well, this is the answer, copy paste. And obviously it wouldn't even go through the brain. It's just from here to there. So I tell them, no, just read the textbook, then read the question, and just don't, without relying on the textbook, you just try to use your own words and give an answer. And then obviously it may not be perfect, so you do that again. You go to the textbook, you read it, and then without relying on the textbook, so kind of like under exam conditions, you try to improve, okay? And you do it 2, 3, 4 times, and then the next step is discussing with your classmates and having a very lively discussion about, what if the assumption is like that, and what if this word changes, and really the idea is to try to get them thinking about it at a more deeper level. Another thing actually I have to is and this is at the end of every assignment, is there's a last question that says, now pause for a moment and write down 1 or 2 good questions about any of the topics covered in this assignment. And I explain to them, there's a quote basically saying that asking questions might often be more important than being able to answer them. So again, this is just another way of trying to get them think about the relevance of those things, or whether there's any gaps in their understanding or the way they can communicate it. And to what extent it helps, I'm not so sure, but anyway.
Okay.
Let's hope.
Sounds good. So at the moment there's a lot of talk within academia about curriculum development, and there's a lot of theory out there. What are your ideas about this constructive alignment?
It's you're right that there's a lot of kind of movement in that direction, and it is certainly a good thing to get academics to think about their teaching. Okay. And I unfortunately, there are many people who would just teach the same subject exactly the same way for many years without any kind of changes. So if you get those people to really think about what they're doing and think about their assessment and about various things, that would be a good thing. I think you can take it too far. One thing that I have, and the constructive alignment idea, it's very natural. I mean, the idea is, you need to align whatever you want the students to learn with, whatever the students are assessed on. I mean, it's so simple. It's almost trivial. In fact, the father of this idea, John Biggs, he himself would say, well, I don't know what this fuss is about. It's all common sense. And I think good lecturers kind of automatically do those sort of things. So my problem sometimes is that it's at some institutions it may go too far. There's too much focus on how the subject guide is structured, and having all the intended learning outcomes and all this, and you may spend hours and days on developing those things, but it may just be on paper, and the fact is that many students don't read the subject guide. So unless you really incorporate it in the teaching, and the lecturer is really equipped to try to deliver on those things, it may just be it may not be very effective. So I would really I'm kind of more practical. I've been to many teaching workshops, and some of them are useful. In fact, I've run many teaching workshops. I don't know to what extent they were useful, but the bottom line is that you really want to. These don't have a very good reputation amongst academics, and partly it is deserved, because a lot of the time it's just all these teaching, theory stuff and words that we don't understand and students don't understand. But it's not so much practical tips about what you can change in the classroom, in terms of the assessment and so on. So theoretically it's a good idea, but it's about the implementation. And I think you can do it well, but you can also do it.
So a good, well-trained subject lecturer is key to success with these things.
Right, yeah.
Yes. Okay, so in relation to that, my understanding is that when you were doing your PhD, you were really heavily involved with a project, an education program. Tell us about that.
It was at the University of New South Wales, and I was approached by the head of the Education Development Unit, who was working on various programs, not only tutor training, these are kind of fairly standard, but they were developing a transition workshop for students from high school that are about to start university. And we know that you know, the dropout rates are fairly high. Yeah. And we know that many students find it very hard to cope the first few months. You know, it's just very different. The learning style is different, the environment's different. Now you have all this freedom and all this independence and all these other distractions that you might have in life. So this sort of thing, many students just don't know how to deal with that. So what we did, we developed and then kind of delivered these workshops. They were in small groups of 15 to 20 students. It was just before they would start university, and we would go through all those kind of tips about how to succeed at university. We'd talk about, you know, how to study and what to do and what not to do, but hopefully in a very engaging way. We talk about learning. One of the things we would talk about is the importance of not just memorizing, but you know, going about it in a deeper way, the way we just discussed. But also things like, you know, learning and teaching style. What you often have is a lecturer that might be too much of a detailed person, in terms of, you know, he would just go straight into the material and talk about the very details of certain things and models and theories, but they may not tell you exactly, you know, how the big picture works, how it all fits with other things. Or it can be the opposite. You know, they're very big picture, but they're the detail. And the problem is if a student is the opposite. So there may be a mismatch between what the student needs and what the lecturer is giving. And that might be why, you know, the student is not coping. So we gave them some strategies what to do in cases like that. We had lots of fun kind of plays. You know, this thing, for example, we got the students to do a puzzle. So in small groups, they each had a puzzle, and then they had to put the puzzle together, you know, faster than the other groups. And then we debriefed and we talked about, you know, what was this demonstrating, and you know, what would have made it easier for you to put the puzzle together. In fact, we didn't let them talk about, you know, when they were doing it. So one of the things that came out was communication is important. Being able to talk in the group is important. The other thing that they realized is that we didn't give them the picture. We didn't, you know, that they were supposed to put together. And they realized, okay, well, if it would have been much easier if they actually had that picture in front of them, so that they could, you know, they knew where they were going. And it's very important in a lecture to tell the students at the beginning, you know, this is where we are, this is where we're going, this is why we're going there. Otherwise, you kind of get lost. So this is one of the. I mean, there were many other. It was very well received. Unfortunately, the head of the unit left, and I left at the same time. So this only ran for 2 years, and then there was no one to take it over. But
students appreciated it.
Well, we had very, very good feedback, and in fact, some students still keep in touch after, you know, 8 years, and they're saying how it's changed the way they approached university. Yeah, so.
Well, that's good. That helps retention. And talking about retention, you get third-year students here who can be fairly critical by the time they're in their third year, and they give you some quite good evaluations. Excellent, actually, 4.8, 4.9 out of 5, pretty consistently. Tell us, how come?
Well, look, this is, I think discount this, you know, teaching evaluations are probably not a very accurate measure of teaching effectiveness, and you know, many people rightly say that they're affected by many factors. You know, the size of the class, you know, how technical the class is. Generally, you know, the more mathematical, the lower the evaluations. There's quite a lot of research on this, so I don't, you know, put too much weight on it. I mean, it's nice to, you know, to get the nod from the students, and you know, it makes the job really easier, and it gives you more more motivation for the future. But I'm not too driven by these evaluations. It's maybe the specific questions that are worthwhile. So what I try to do in my subjects is to really experiment. So every semester I change things around and I come up with different ways, and most of it is based on talking to students and asking them what works and what they might change. In fact, one of the things I do after every exam, I have on the online system, I have this what I call a reflections thread, exam reflections thread, where I encourage the students to talk about the exam experience and whether they did well and why and what they would have changed about the way they prepare for the exam. And students seem to find it very useful when they see that it was not just them who struggled, but they might have been other people. And then when you see what others are saying they would change, you're thinking, oh, maybe I should change that too. So this is one of the ways that you can get feedback and maybe improve the teaching. So on the evaluations, there's various things that you can trace from year to year. How you're using, whether the students get feedback on their performance, or whether you're using the assessment correctly, whether the assessment is linked to the goals, those sorts of things. And if you see big changes over time, this is an indication that some of the changes you implemented in your class may have actually had a positive effect. But overall, I wouldn't kind of overemphasize the evaluations.
So you've recently won a very prestigious award from the Australian government. Tell us about your other awards that you've had over the years.
Well, I'm sure people can find those on my website if they want it. There's this Lecturer of the Year award, which is based on students' nominations, and I've kind of won it a few times now. But look, again, it's nice to win awards, but it's not really what's driving me. I really the best reward is for students to change the way they learn and to realize that it's actually a fun activity and you see the enthusiasm. So sometimes, I see students in my first year class and they kind of don't do too much work and they don't get engaged, and then I see them 2 years later and they tell you that they've benefited from this and they change. In fact, I recently, it was earlier this year, I got an email from my past student who was here on exchange, and he did my third year monetary policy class, and he's now doing his PhD back in Germany, and he said it really, first it got him to study in the similar area, and it got him to do a PhD, and he's actually using a lot of the techniques in his teaching, and he invited me to Germany, so I visited him. That was nice. But
so with your breadth and depth of experience in both teaching, learning and research, have you got anything else to share the viewers on your teaching and learning that you've been discussing today?
Look, it's really, I think it's the way the lecturers approach the subjects are very important. So one of the tips I might share with lecturers is to always think about what they do just before the lecture. I mean, it really makes a difference if you just run in the class and have so many things. You're not really focused on that class. But if you take the 10 minutes before and just kind of relax a little bit and just think about the class and think about, kind of realize that that's a great opportunity that you have to step in front of the students, and that you actually appreciate this opportunity, and it's not taking it for granted. So this is one of the things I've learned from some of the people I've met in the past, that and we all have people who would influence your teaching career, who acted as role models, and And you know, this is one of the things I've learned, that you know, what you think and how you approach the teaching can really have a big impact on your students and how they're learning. But you know, let me think whether I can think of something else. One of the other things that I do in my classes is sometimes students can get various bonus marks. And the idea is, you know, if you don't do too well on the midterm exam, some students, again, you don't want them to kind of give up and drop out. You want to give them a chance. So one of the things I do is that they, all the students are required to redo the mid-semester exam as a part of the tutorial, and then I don't tell them in advance, but those who've done it get an extra, you know, bonus mark, which you know, again, I mean, it's not a big deal, but the general lesson is that, you know, if they work hard, there might be some payoff, even if they don't know in advance that would be the case. So this is one of the things. Yeah, I think with Furley,
one extra mark out of 25 makes a big difference to some students.
Yeah, and then there's others. You know, some of those videos that I do, and I just did 2 weeks ago. I did 3 with former members of the board of the Reserve Bank of Australia, and you know, very prolific economists. So sometimes I get my students to watch these, and you know, sometimes there might be a little bit of a bonus mark for those sorts of activities. And generally, you know, I've set the standards quite high, so the exams are not trivial; they're fairly difficult.
Yes.
You know, kind of, I think, appropriate to the level of the students, but then they can, you know, a couple of bonus marks can make a bit of a difference. And again, you know, is it bribing the students? I don't know.
Would it achieve the result and they learn?
Maybe a goal incentive. That's the way I like to think of it.
I reckon that's a great goal incentive. It's a bit like cricket, you know. You might have a duck one time, but you've got another chance. Yeah.
Well, I'm afraid I'm not very qualified to talk about cricket. You know, my 2 or 3 experiences with it, I think, are not enough to. But you probably know more than I do.
Okay, well, thank you, Jan, for your time today, sharing your expertise with a wide audience, and wish you all the best in your teaching and learning at La Trobe University. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Linda.